Anything. Thank you, everyone. We are now convened from our brief respite. We're back in order. And Mr. Silveri, you have the floor.
Okay, so for the audience, you can't see this. This is not rocket science. I'm just telling you that it has the 4 names of the 4 people who interviewed on this. I'll tell you what I'm doing with it. It's for the board to see as a visual, but it's not necessary that you see it. You'll know what's happening. So our job now that we've heard from the 4 applicants, you've had a chance to review the application that they submitted, their resume, their cover letter, any of the rest of the materials they gave you, all of the feedback forms, and review your own notes from all 4 of the interviews to refresh your memory. Now is the difficult decision of narrowing the field down from 4 applicants down to 2 final candidates who, and remember that at this point you're not picking your next superintendent yet. What you're deciding is, of the 4, who are the 2 that you feel, again, most closely match the profile that we developed, who stand the best chance to be a highly successful superintendent here, and who you want to learn more about, because that's where you are now. You're not making that decision. You're picking the 2 that you feel that you want to learn more about through a subsequent second-round interview, through the stakeholder meetings during the course of the day when the candidates come back for the second-round interview, and then through the site visits as well, right? So what I'm going to ask you to do is for each of you to have in mind, and presumably you do already, of those 4 candidates, who are the 2 that at this moment you would like to see advance in the process. I have the 4 names here, and I have them just in alphabetical order, so there's no other priority, just so that you know that. I'm going to kind of go one at a time, and if there's anybody who would like to speak in advocacy of that candidate, to say why you were impressed, why you might like to see that person advance, I want to give you the opportunity to do so, so your colleagues can hear your thinking and your rationale behind that. We'll go one at a time. I don't want you to feel compelled. Sometimes boards will have nice people on them, and you might get to a candidate, and frankly, it might be that nobody really cares to say anything. That's okay. No one really has to say anything. This is an opportunity for you to think out loud, share your thinking with your colleagues, so that as we get down to kind of a process of elimination that I'll walk you through, you'll have some idea of what your colleagues are thinking. That makes sense?
Well, we'll see how it goes.
We will, won't we? Without further delay, we're going to see how this goes. So, we want to start with Sean Black. If you would like to say something on behalf of Dr. Black in support of, please feel free, and if not, that's okay as well.
I'd like to say something. I was quite impressed with the academia, with the scores, bringing the test scores up, and even the several publications and the deep research and the strong stability. So it's a lot of very, looking through the research and then looking at, because I'm really big at making sure that I listen to the community as well, and they had a lot of really high marks from the community. It says strong leader that has focus and getting the scores aligned and getting us back in step where we need to be. So I was pretty impressed, and the community had really nice things to say about it.
Okay, thank you.
The only thing I would say about that is maybe sometimes this situation, because you have all the community, you have all of us, that you might be nervous, and so
Sure.
your authentic self might not come through as well.
Sure.
Because he does have a lot of knowledge. He did a lot of publications. There is a lot of positive things about him, but I'm just thinking that maybe we weren't able to see that as clear, and maybe a second interview would help him to be a little bit more relaxed and be able to actually shine and show what he has to bring to the table.
I will say part of the difficulty you face, and I've mentioned this to you before, but it bears repeating, you have to consider everything in this decision, right? So it's not just about the interview. The interview is obviously very important. It's important. It's a high-pressure situation, but it's a very high-pressure job. So how someone handles a high-pressure interview is a bit of a window, too, into how they handle the job. But it's still not the be-all and end-all. So again, you have the benefit of seeing all of the application materials, all the supporting documentation they provided, et cetera. So it's important that you keep your thoughts on everything, full picture.
I also believe that, that he did that he presented himself very well. However, it's hard for me not to recognize that the mission of somebody in his position with the Detroit school system is a little bit different at this juncture than say the mission of our school district or possibly Taylor. And it seems to be many questions were associated with keeping people in the school district. There were a lot of finance-related issues, a lot of discussion, and I certainly think what Shauna said was right on the money. And what you said, this is one tiny glimpse into someone's entire career. But we do have to make a choice. And I would like to know more about him, but would I like to know more about him over and above to others?
That's the question.
Well, I guess I look at the mission that he's been on, and I see that the mission that we're heading for, the fact is our finances aren't perfect, but they're stable. In fact, they're better than they've been in 40 years. That is not the predominant concern right now.
Okay.
Test scores are, and that is not the main mission that he's been on right now.
Okay. So I'm going to point something there. What I appreciate is you're making an observation without being critical, and it's really important, because one thing we don't want to do is we're talking about the applicants. Again, we're looking to speak in support of, and we want to make sure these are 4 people who have put themselves out. Their reputation is on the line publicly, and we want to be careful not to say anything that would be, disparaging or negative about them. But again, you walk that line well, is what I'm saying partially, because you're not being critical of him. You're making an observation about what he brings to the table that might be a little bit different from what you're looking for.
And from this chair, I typically allow all my colleagues to speak before I speak, but in these circumstances, that almost seems a cop-out, so that's
Okay.
why I've decided to speak.
All right. So anything else? Any other comments? Anyone would like to?
This might be getting close to the line. I have a question. He cited in his interview, Dr. Black did, and also in his resume, a 29% growth in academics. I didn't see evidence of that in the resume. I didn't see anything anywhere close to that. He also cited increased enrollment for the Detroit Community School District. But I'm also of the I believe that they have taken over the Michigan, AA Achievement Academy.
I'm not sure about that, to be very honest.
I have. I just read that recently. So those students are back in the community school district.
So again, I would say if there are folks that you are impressed enough by that you think they warrant a second look, if there's more that you feel like you need to see, we can ask that of them as well. Bear that in mind.
I have a generic comment. I specifically asked if I could call people by their first name to see the reaction. Many people, when you do that, will relax and others will bristle. So that is why I asked that question of each candidate. The other was to let them know up front I was an educator, because I didn't want to hear edubabble.
Yeah.
I did not want to hear generic answers. I wanted them, and that's why I said dig deeper, please, because I wanted them to show me what they actually did know and what they didn't know. And that was very telling also
Okay.
for all the candidates.
So again, you may want to speak to that when you're speaking in favor of whichever candidates you'd like to advocate for. Anything else on Dr. Black? Dr. Sear?
I thought Dr. Sear had a very effective presentation of the content of the various questions. Obviously, somebody who is on the front line of the issues similar to our school district's issues, has a working understanding of them and presents well, which is certainly the job of a superintendent, to be able to speak extemporaneously about any issue, not knowing what's going to be asked. And also, there was some conversation about the need to, when you're in a leadership position, sometimes you have to make very unpopular decisions. And obviously, she's someone who's been in that position. You don't make all friends, we all know that. And she's gone through that, and it seems as though, not unlike the type of issues that she would likely be faced with in our school district. And I thought that she appeared to handle everything professionally in the way that a superintendent, that a leader would handle them. Taking responsibility for them, moving forward, moving to the goal, in spite of some of those challenges. I thought it was professional. So she, as you say, what we're doing now is saying, would you like to know more? Would you like to dig deeper? And I certainly do on all of, anybody that we talk about, but she's one that I would want to know more about.
I have, and so I'm gonna make this as a general statement for everyone and not just, my concern is that sometimes people can be excellent interviewers
Sure.
and present themselves very well, and then when they get into the actual seat, there's something different. So for a scenario, I can date, I can be on the market. When I have people come over to the house, my house is clean, I'm cooking and doing all types of stuff. And then once I get them and I reel them in, and now they're ready to marry me, then they come home and they find out I'm a slob, I got stuff all over the place, I don't cook, So I'm just saying, we clean up well to present ourselves, but how do you get to that deep, especially when there might be some concerns?
Of course. So it goes back again. On the one hand, again, the interview is one piece of the puzzle, right? So you don't read too much into it necessarily. It is a factor if somebody is nervous and doesn't present themselves well. On the other hand, if somebody is very polished and presents themselves exceptionally well, well, sure, you should consider that, but that's not the be-all and end-all either, which again is why you go back, you have the benefit of knowing what all of their work history is, their experiences, their education, who they've listed as references, how people have reacted to them, how you have reacted to them, etc. There's more still to be learned, but you've learned enough to still be able to make a decision about which two of those four do you feel like are closest to what you need in this district and who you need and would like to hear more about. That's where you are now. So I agree with you. It works both ways in terms of what you hear in the interviews, both with the people who might struggle a little bit and the people who just kill it. That still is not everything.
I look at this, I look at the job like it's a pizza. And there are many pieces of this pizza. And somebody coming in who has dealt with one particular aspect of the job versus somebody who has dealt with many different aspects of the job and after all, what we are doing here is educating students.
Yes.
So somebody that's involved in the transportation component, for instance, it's a very important aspect of what needs to be done. But it doesn't relate directly to the classroom activities. Like, for instance, curriculum does. So I'm also looking at that. Now, that's not to say that people who are not good leaders in this field don't understand all aspects. And certainly they're going to have professionals underneath them that they can call upon to be the, to be that person when that person is needed. So you're more the band leader. You don't have to know how to play every instrument.
Right.
But this school district is so big that to come here and understand one aspect of it doesn't always, I don't think it necessarily is the best fit. I think somebody who has played every instrument or played various instruments is, at least in my mind, I might be wrong, that's just in my mind, that would seem to be something of value.
So I think that's an important factor to consider, but I also think it's important that you want to find the best person for the job, right? So one cautionary note too is you can find somebody who checks all the boxes and has had all the requisite experiences, but if it's not the right person and it's not going to be the right fit, it's not enough, right? And so you may have somebody who is the right person and who will be the right fit, that maybe has a little bit more of a learning curve, but in the long run, that's going to be the person who's going to better serve this school district. And I'm not saying that in advocacy or against any of the 4 people you've spoken to. I'm speaking in broad generalities. That's partly what makes this a very difficult decision.
We have a lot of information. We have just a ton of information that came along with their application. We have a ton of stuff that they've given to us as well. And then we have the information from the interview itself.
Yep.
And one of the things that I'm interested in noting for myself is that my opinion of them does change based on just reading the original documents and then listening to the interview.
Sure.
And maybe more importantly, listening to the comments from the stakeholders in the audience. And I'll tell you why. It might seem a little off, but I once read a thing about guessing how many beans are in a jar. And you can guess yourself and probably come nowhere near it, but if you ask a whole room full of people, and they'll put all numbers all over the map, and when you get all done, you'll come really close to how many beans are in the jar. So I looked at everyone's comments, and I came up with my own grading system, which has helped me. I already have one for sure, that I know for sure that I was advancing, and they agreed. And I had another that I wasn't sure about, and they kind of agreed. And so I'm interested in knowing more about Dr. Sayre.
I will say it happens sometimes too, that you can come out of this first round and have one person that you feel strongly about, and maybe there's not even for you necessarily a close second. But, you know, again, there's a lot more to be learned. As I told you at the beginning, we want to trust the process, follow the process, and we don't want to skip steps. So even if you feel that way now, and even if you ultimately you feel like you've got a strong first and a little bit of a distant second, I'm still going to push you to pick your top 2. Let's take those important next steps. Let's continue to learn about these candidates. And I have seen circumstances where it was clearly leaning one way after round 1, and it changed after the rest of the process, because you will learn more about these people.
It's interesting to me that everything that you've said so far throughout this process, from the very beginning, in one way or another, has come true. So I just state that for the record. You explained that these things would likely occur, and those things you've already stated already have, so.
It either means I'm experienced or I'm old, or maybe both,
Yeah.
I don't know. So, anything else on Dr. Sayre for now? Mr. Dignan?
Yeah, I was really impressed with the career motives with the students, the different relationships with the community. You know, I was really, really digging into all the resumes. I looked at all the letters and read through all the documents. But yeah, I was really, really impressed with what was going on with that first one, the energy, something that we need to bring everything back together, and the level and years of experience. So I was really impressed.
Thank you.
I have nothing but good to say about Mr. Dignan. As far as I'm concerned, he aced the interview. There was thing that I was drawn to was his background. You know, it might not make much sense what I'm trying to say, but I'm trying to say it right. His mother's an educator. He didn't really know, but then he's drawn back into it and made a lifetime career of it. His response to our questions was without delay. He really acquitted himself well.
He checked a lot of boxes, if not all of them.
I feel very much like my colleagues that have expressed themselves so far, and so does our group of stakeholders. When I scored the way they feel exactly the way I feel, that this man showed a great deal of what he's capable of, and I think it's the kind of thing that we are looking for. And I do want to know much more about it.
I kind of did the same thing that Mark did. I kind of had a system where I evaluated what stakeholders said, and it came out exactly like I was thinking. And what I liked the most was just a grasp of every issue that it seemed that was important to our school district. I don't know if that's a consequence of the study of our school district in advance of this. I suspect there was quite a bit of that. But I know what the Southfield School District has done and what he's been exposed to as a consequence of some very positive partnerships, which I have long felt would be a very positive thing for Wayne Westland, especially with universities. Also, he offered things about our VOTEC, which I think is totally underutilized. And when those challenges existed with trying to get these things up and running, with the same challenges we have with finding the people to do the teaching, what have you, they were creative and they thought out of the box and they partnered with unions, and it just I was wanting to hurry up and ask my question before he answered it. So yes, I'm very strong there.
Okay. Anybody else?
I would just say I agree with what's already been said about that candidate.
Okay. Okay, then Keith McDonald.
I feel bad for this guy. He was so nervous. He was so, he had a very difficult time with the interview. And I know, I've been through interviews where I don't do well. I go home and I'm going, well, I blew it, I won't get this job. But at least they called me back for the second time so that I could better myself. I think on a second look, he might do better. But I know his focus when he interviewed was in one particular area, and we're looking for the whole package instead of being that focused. I don't know whether a second interview will prove us wrong in our estimate, but I felt bad for him. He was so tense.
I liked him. While his interview didn't go as well as I expected it to, my idea of him is that he is already made, working so close to our district, he's made inroads with a lot of our employees. He knows our district well. I think he has much more to show us than what came out in the interview.
I'm just gonna talk because I totally agree with what Carol said. I think that there's a lot more there. I think maybe he's so vested in the pathway to the superintendency. I think he believes that this is something he could do very, very well, and I think it's just made him a little bit nervous, maybe. And the thing that got me about it, John, was it's exactly what you said 2 months ago would likely occur. And I thought of it as it was going, and it's not that it was terrible, he didn't do a terrible job, but obviously Carol, I think, is right. I also think that Fred is right, that there's a lot more there. And he's functioned in a school district so similar to ours. And it's impossible not to know the people that are so close to us. We do know. And we know what their success is in dealing with others. And that's such a large part of this job. If you have the ability to deal with others, whether they're subordinates or colleagues, with respect and professionalism, and that's such a big piece for me. So it would, you gotta come up with 2.
Well, and what I'm hearing is there are things to like about all 4 of the candidates, which is fantastic. That's
Yeah,
really
there-
what you
there-
want.
There are.
It makes for a more difficult decision, but that's exactly what you want, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
ideally, it is a tough decision, but you're gonna end up with 2 strong finalists and have a great chance to end up with the person you need long-term.
I want to add just one, maybe 2 things about Mr. McDonald.
Sure.
He seems to share our view on being opposed to privatization. And that rung true for me. And I also came away with the impression from his resume and somewhat from his interview too, that he could be a healer, that he could put together a team. And it seems to me that we've lost a number of people from central office in the last 2 years, a number of people from building administration during that same stretch of time. One of the negative comments from the stakeholders was that this man had been over there in Livonia all this time stealing our people. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, okay. What will he do when he gets here? Will he send some people over there? Or will he steal some Livonia people?
My thing with Mr. McDonald, if I can find something that's really positive that came out of that, is he has an investment in Wayne Westland because he has a lot of family members who are tied to this district, and so I think that makes a difference when a person is being a superintendent, when they have something vested in the community.
Yeah.
So.
I'd like to add two things. One is that he did show his wholehearted commitment to us by saying that this is the only place he's applied to, the only place he will apply to. We won't see his name anywhere else because this is where he really wants to be. And the second is, even though he was nervous, or seemingly nervous, I don't know if he really was, at the very end, he really came alive. His final comments, when he was allowed to speak after having gone through all the questioning, I thought he was much more relaxed and a much easier presentation of himself.
If I could add.
Sure.
I really liked his comment about, I want to be your next long-serving superintendent. I like that a lot.
So to add to that, he does have a history of that because he has spent his whole career in Livonia. So he shows that he has a loyalty and a commitment to a district. So.
And his relationships with the universities and partnerships. And then even what I like about Livonia, they have a great school system and they have a career tech as well. So he has, experience dealing with that, even on the human resources aspect. And one thing I do like about it, we do need to bring more people back. So maybe you have that outside of the box innovation to, really, have some creative ways to bring more people back to the district.
Sure.
And that from an HR perspective.
Right.
What are you looking for at this point? Are you looking for each of us?
No, I'll tell you, I don't want to step on anything that you want to say about any of these folks at this point, and when I know you're done, I'll tell you exactly what we're going to do next. So is there anything else that anyone feels like they would like to share about any of the four folks that you've interviewed? And if not, here's what we'll do. And trust me, we're going to get to the end of this, and we're going to end up with two finalists, all right? But we're going to start with process of elimination. I'm going to go around. I'm just going to start, if it's okay, with Mr. Buckaloo right here in the end and just kind of go clockwise. I'm going to go in just in order that they're listed here, alphabetical. So we'll start with Dr. Black. And it's a simple, and at this point I want to be clear for you, you need to have two people in mind, right? No cheating. You can't say yes to more than two. But you need to have two people in mind that you would say yes to at this point that you want to see advance. So I'm going to simply go around. So that Mr. Buckaloo, Dr. Black, if that's one of the two people he wants to see advance, he'll say yes. If it's not, he'll say no. I'm going to keep going around until I get to a yes. So if it's a no, I'm just going to keep going. If we obviously get to 7 no's, we're going to eliminate that person and we're going to have narrowed the field down from 4 to 3. And then we're going to go back again until we hopefully get it down that way from 3 to 2. If ultimately we get a little stuck, and sometimes we do, there's another way to get us unstuck, but we won't go there just yet. Partly what I want you to pay attention to is if you realize at some point that you're kind of a lone voice and that your colleagues are just not where you are and that there's a lot of support for somebody else, you may want to kind of strategically decide I can go with that, I can support where my colleagues are going. And again, bearing in mind you're not making a final decision, you're picking two people that you're going to learn more about, and hopefully one of them will emerge as your next superintendent. So, you had a question, Dr. Weaver? Okay. Any questions about that? So, talking about Dr. Black?
No.
No.
Boy, this is hard.
Yes, it is.
Jeez, Lord.
Supposed to be hard. This is a big decision.
No, there should be some ringers in there we can just pitch out.
That tells you that you picked well when you decided who you wanted to interview. Good
No,
for you.
This is, because they all bring something good to the
Yes,
table.
right.
Yeah.
No,
I wanna say yes, but I'm gonna say no.
No.
I'm like Sean, I want to say yes, but I'm going to say no.
No.
I wanna say yes, but since the board has it, I gotta say no.
Okay. So, down to 3. And since we ended with Ms. Hines, going to come back to Mr. Buckaloo. Lucky you, you get to start again.
It's not just me, is it, Tom?
I know. So, we're at Dr. Sear.
We'll have a seating change. No on Dr. Sear.
No, Dr. Sear.
no.
That's a no for me.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 1 yes on Dr. Sear, and so we're going to move on at this point to Mr. Ignan. We're on to Mr. Cox.
Yes,
Okay, so we have a yes on Mr. Dignan.
yes.
We're going to move on to Mr. McDonald.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't understand your process. The other 3 didn't vote on the SEER.
So what we do is we go around, if there's is one person who wants to see the candidate advance, we're going to keep that person in the mix.
Okay.
And we're just looking to see if anyone will kind of naturally eliminate, because everybody had said no, and that happened with the first. And I appreciate kind of how some of you framed that, even to say I wanted to say yes, but because what that indicates, again, is you're saying that there were multiple candidates with strengths. Maybe you'd like to learn more about even more than 2, but it's a tough decision. Ultimately, you're going to get down to 1, and right now it's 2. So we've been through kind of the first round of this. You got a little bit of a glimpse of what people are thinking, perhaps. We're going to do it that way one more time, see where we land. So you're lucky, Mr. Buckaloo. It stopped before it got to Ms. Hines. We're going to go back up to Dr. Sear, and
No.
yes, Mr. No. Clockwise, back to you, Mr.
I
Buckaloo.
gave her a no already.
That's okay, we're going right back through.
All right, no.
Okay.
No.
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 Okay, I'm still gonna go back and make sure we have at least a yes on these last 2 candidates. I presume so. Did we end with Dr. Weaver that time? I think we did.
McDonald, I said yes.
Okay, so Ms. Hines, Mr.
Yes.
Dignan, got a yes. We wanna keep him in, and
Which can, well,
rather than Mr. McDonald.
yes.
Okay. So through that process, you've eliminated 2 of the candidates. You have identified Mr. Dignan and Mr. McDonald as the 2 who you would like to invite back for second-round interviews and consider them the finalists for the position. So again, you have not selected your next superintendent. You've only selected the 2 people who you're intending to learn more about, hear more about, and to help inform you that much more to make this huge decision that you face. I will say this, and I want to say this publicly because it comes up sometimes. I don't think it's going to happen here. But the question comes up, what if ultimately we don't think either one of these people should be our next superintendent? I will, and again, I want to say it publicly, I said it to you privately, you should never just settle for anybody for a decision this big, never, right? So if we go through the rest of this process, we get to the end where it's decision time, and you are convinced that you have not yet found the right person for this job, you should not be selecting one of these people as your next superintendent, and we will then have dialogue about where do we go from here, and
We'll have to find someone to tell Jill.
Jill's probably not happy with me at the moment, right? But I just want to, but I think that's an important point to make. And again, I'm optimistic that the right person is within the mix. But just so everybody knows that, the most important thing is that you feel confident that you have found the right person to be your next superintendent. And that's how we need to feel when we get to the end of this
So
process.
you have been through that before where they got to the end and they decided they didn't want any?
I have not in the searches that I've conducted, not because of anything I've done, I'm not, but just, I haven't personally experienced that. I'm gonna tell you that that's been in the history of the Michigan Leadership Institute, from my understanding, that's been an exceptionally rare occurrence. Because I think the process lends itself to identifying a strong candidate field and going through a process that leaves the board to feel like they've made the right choice. But it has happened, even though it's been rare. And better that you get there and then you say, we need to keep at this. As I told you before, you've hired me to assist you with this process. My job's not done until you have a new superintendent. So if we reach that point, I'm not coming back at you with another contract for you to sign. We just simply keep working until we find the right person.
And let me say this to the stakeholders in the room who are every bit in this process like we are. You're seeing all the same thing we're seeing. This is something that John mentioned from the very beginning. Basically, don't settle. Find the right person. And that was certainly something we wanted to hear from him, so we appreciate that, John.
Okay, so you know that it's on October, my goodness. Not even close, March 16th and 17th. It's a Monday and Tuesday. And just to remind you, so you're scheduled to interview these two folks. I will be calling, by the way, for everybody to know, all four of these applicants tonight. I'll start with the two that you've selected. Again, I typically call in alphabetical order, so I'll try Mr. Dignan first. I told all four of these people to expect a call this evening. I'll give him first choice between the 16th and 17th. The other candidate will get the other night. So you're going to interview those two candidates, the board will, 7 o'clock. 60 minutes we're scheduling for the second round interviews. But we're working on a schedule. I shared that with Cheryl and Tamara to schedule stakeholder meetings on each of those days. So in other words, on the day when Mr. Dignan comes in, he'll be interviewing with you at 7 o'clock, but starting at around 12:30 on that day, he'll be coming in and meeting with various groups of stakeholders. We've identified administrators, staff members, union leaders, students, and parents and community members. And it'll be just kind of with students, we're gonna have to structure it, but beyond that, it'll be kind of an open invitation to those folks to come in. I'll be there with the applicant, with the finalist. I'll make just some opening remarks about what's happening, give the candidate the chance to just briefly talk about their background and why they want to be here, and then it's an opportunity for your stakeholders to ask questions. It'll be a give and take. I'm going to be handing them feedback forms, asking them to provide additional feedback. We'll collect those, we'll copy those, you'll get those as well. So by the time you walk out of here on the evening of the 17th, you will have conducted the second round interviews, and you'll have another fairly large stack of, I would presume, feedback forms on each of the two finalists from your stakeholders who interacted with them during the course of the day. And I want to remind you, bear in mind that ultimately then the following week, I'm going to need to know which three members of the board are willing and able to participate in site visits. Should be the same three board members. Once you determine that, you can let me know which days work for those three people in that week, what time frame works. Typically it's a 4 to 5 hour block of time. You can tell me what works. I'll let the finalists know, and I'll provide more kind of instruction there in writing too. I'll just tell you up front too, in terms of second round interview questions, and we've got some time, but in the tab in your binder that speaks to that, you have sample second round interview questions. So I'll be reaching out to you by email. Remember, I'm either going to be kind of randomly assigning each of you two of those questions, or if you have questions that you think need to be asked instead of, perhaps, some of the questions you see there, I'm going to ask the board members again, and I'll follow up by email, but I'll tell you now, I'll ask you to submit any suggestions to President Cox. The suggestion should be, I think we can eliminate this question. Maybe based on what you heard, it's redundant. Maybe it's just not as strong as some of the others in your opinion. And here's what I'd like to replace it with. And so maybe there's a question that you think hasn't been asked yet, something that you really need to know about each of these folks, and you think that that should be inserted. And the reason it goes through the board president is somebody ultimately has to There may be competing opinions. Somebody's going to have to make the final call. President Cox will submit those kind of final questions to me. I'll randomly assign to each of the board members, 2 for each board member. We'll just go in order, and we'll be ready for action.
There are also questions that stakeholders have written.
Yeah,
Sure,
that's-
sure.
And we want to make sure those are that's
Well,
part of
and
it
so
as well.
you have those too, and again, so ultimately,
I've
you
also
can-
received emails on questions, and
Okay.
they're more pertinent to our district, and I think that that's appropriate at this stage.
absolutely it is. And, so ultimately, I mean, honestly, I've never seen this before, but heck, you could end up giving me a whole different set of questions than you find in that binder. If you feel like that's important, that we'll roll with it. My job partially is to kind of polish them up and make them professional, and I'll do that. But if you give me kind of the meat of what it is that you want to ask, I can work on it from there, so.
You know, I noticed during the process of questions, some of those questions were, it didn't seem to me to be, you know, I even mentioned this when we were putting them together. I would have liked a little bit more pointed questions for Wayne Westline, but what I noticed through this process was that the question provided a foundation for the person being interviewed to respond. That was just as valuable
Sure,
as answering a specific question. How would they respond to this?
right.
What is their take? And you saw all 4 people, and very often they took a different take
Right.
on it, and that was valuable to see. So,
You gain some insight into people that way, you do.
So on the 17th, will you be providing corned beef, cabbage, and green beer?
at least the corned beef and cabbage.
Maybe the corned beef and cabbage, we'll talk about the after interview festivities, maybe at a later date. So any other, you know, and again, I will be in communication with you via email too, so with the things I'm telling you tonight, you're not gonna have to commit to memory. I just wanna review that and have you bear it in mind. I will be calling all 4 of these folks tonight before I leave the site.
Of course, you'll share with them that they were all,
I absolutely will. I'll let them know that this turned out to be a really difficult decision for you, which is to their credit, absolutely.
yeah,
Any other questions or comments for me?
no, John, not from me.
All right.
The next item on our agenda is citizens' comments. Any citizens that would like to address the board, you can do so now. We wore you all out. Please, please.
My name is Dave Mills. A lot of people know my parents and me, I guess, at this point. We all talked about test scores today, and a lot of the interviewees talked about improving test scores and teaching teachers how to teach and all that kind of stuff. But something I noticed was nobody talked about buy-in with the students. Just in one of the 10-minute recesses, students each year have to take, I took the MEEP, and it's now the MME, the MSTEP, the ACT, SAT, NWEA, PSAT, all several times a year. I know when I was an 8th grader, I was dumb. I didn't take any of these seriously. Even as a senior in high school, I didn't take any of these tests serious. And it's not the teacher's fault. Some kids do bad. I teach at Tinkham right now, and we had NWEA testing 2 weeks ago. I had a kid finish in 6 minutes one day. That's with, there's a timer to prevent kids from just clicking rapidly and finishing up. He got flagged for 3 questions, that's it, and he still finished in 6 minutes. We tell the kids to take these tests serious. I know some Tinkham kids can be an extreme, but I know this goes through middle schoolers, Wayne Memorial, John Glenn, VOTEC kids, everybody. I hope the board asks the 2 lucky gentlemen how they increase this buy-in, this burnout our kids I faced. I know it's a difficult one. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Sure, thank you very much. Point well taken. Anyone else? Thank you very much. Please stick with this process. We need your help and involvement, and we're very appreciative of it. The next item on our agenda is review and recommendations. Members of the Board of Education, in keeping with the theme, Mr. Buckaloo.
Thank you. Well, one thing I noticed as I was looking through the comments from stakeholders is that you had different views of who you liked and who you didn't like. Every one of these 4 candidates had an advocate out there. Every one of these was liked number one by at least one of you. And I could see that. I could see in Dr. Black his ideas on equity funding. I really, truly enjoyed hearing him talk about equity funding. Dr. Sire, when she talked about coaching and how that approach to education can have positive effects. I recall reading somewhere that from one of our stakeholders that we're already trying to do that in our school district, and she certainly would have been someone in our district who could have put that forward. When I went through the resumes and I made my own private estimate of what I thought of these people before the interviews, I thought that Mr. Dingman was a rock star. I truly did. I thought that Mr. McDonald was a blue-collar hero. I thought those 2 people had the capacity to bring something to our district that really was going to be beneficial to us. I could be wrong about that, but that was my take on it. I have to say I'm just so thankful that all of you folks showed up on the 17th and again on the 16th. Bring a friend. The more input that we have, the better the decision is going to reflect the needs of this community. So,
Thank you, Tom. Carol?
I got nothing. I'm
Sean?
tired. I'm tired, I got nothing.
I just wanna say I appreciate each and every one of your feedback, because it affects your lives. And so it is really important that you're here and that you're a part of the process, because whoever is in that chair, like I said, it's your livelihood. So if your livelihood is important to you, like mine is, then you wanna be involved. There was a question that was asked, from one of the feedbacks, I just wanted to acknowledge about one of the questions that we asked. Mrs. Hines actually asked it about collaborating and making other schools. At first, I didn't understand it either, but what it is to get an understanding of, are you just centered on yourself, or are you willing to collaborate with other people? How do you feel about, because at some point, it may come a time where you might have to work with another district in order to get something done. So it was a thing to put out there to make you think about it and say, okay, am I just selfish, or am I willing to work? So that's why we asked the one question that we did. And with that being said, I'm just grateful for all of you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean. Mel?
I'd like to thank all the candidates that came out. It was a very tough decision, and I'm really glad that the community came out. To me, that's like the most important is reading all the it's like hard to think, it's really late, but like just reading all all of the what you guys had to say, because that's most important. Like all the past board members have said before, what you think is very important, because this is your superintendent. So we want to make sure that you guys are happy. That's our job, to take care of the employees of the district and make sure that we're moving in the right direction. So thank you guys so much for coming out. And nothing's good after 9 o'clock, and I'm done. I can't think of
Mark?
Yes, thank you all for being here. I mean, we've been here for more than 4 hours, and your dedication to your community is just phenomenal. It's been a great help, I know for me, and I'm sure the rest of the board members as well. So thank you very much. And Mr. Buckle, you said bring a friend on the 17th. My best friend is my wife, and that's the 46th anniversary of when we met, and she insists that I celebrate that every 17th of March, so I'm gonna bring her.
Well, you really know how to throw a party. Is that it? Dr. Weaver?
Oh, I'm sorry, are we still here? Okay, yeah, okay. I just have one word. President Cox said it beautifully. Pizza. Thank
I
you.
know we're hungry.
You know, I'll bet you I'm not the only one here that's thinking about the 2 people who are not asking back. And I thought, if you've ever been up for a job and you weren't selected, this is a real this is a real indicator. You can be very qualified, very talented, could be very good at that job, and for some reason, you might not know, someone else just fit the mold a little bit better that night in someone else's view. And it's it should not represent who you are or what you have to offer or what your talents are. Dr. Black and Dr. Sear were both very talented, very capable, and they just, for whatever reason, they weren't selected tonight, but it says nothing about what they have to offer. So, being somebody that's happened to in my life, it makes me feel a little bit better moving forward. It's no personal reflection, it's just, I don't know, just a path. So, thank you, everyone, for being a part of this. It makes it feel not so lonely up here making this when you have all this support. So thank you. With that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Dr. Weaver, support by Mrs. Madell. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. We're adjourned.